Yeah, it has been an interesting couple of weeks. Anyways, this week. What am I? So apparently, the president is in Saudi Arabia meeting with MBS. He didn't get the sword dance, which was a dance what Trump and the king were doing the first time. Were saying that they were going to run the world. So it was interesting to see. I wonder what the read Biden got on the youngster, probably being the judging from how he dealt with MBS dealt with Trump, probably the same thing. You'll be gone, I'll be here. Blah blah blah. Same thing they always end up learning, but we just keep grinding. So as far as oil is concerned, you know, you had to have the little conversation, but what the little youth was doing was testing and scaring the any expats, any Saudi expats, and then showing off his power or what he thinks his power is, being a little cub. Once just the '70s all over again, but a little bit less stupid. Where was I? Anyways, what? This is mostly about the January 6th. Um, as I was thinking, and I have to write a letter to slavery. Okay, so right now we know what's going on with the January 6th. It's in voting rights. It's what happened is, as I was sitting looking about Roe versus Wade, and as I was thinking about it, they called the Civil War amendments. No, decisis. Sorry, decisis. The Civil War amendments. They're called the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So then I went back to the 12th and 11th because we had the first 10, which is the Bill of Rights. We started with the First Amendment, which is the first right to free speech. So you have your first right, which is the original right, the right to free speech. Well, let's just say here first. Let's just start with the First Amendment. All right. No prohibiting, prohibiting the free exercise or freedom of speech, press, right of peaceable people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government to redress the grievances. Now, the right to peaceably assemble. That's one or two persons or more to assemble in private or public. And then you have the Second Amendment, which is different than the Confederate Second Amendment because in the Second Amendment there is a comma that changes the full definition. Where is it? That changes what it's being said. And the Second Amendment reading as present, so is being read as it was in the Confederate Constitution, which is the removal of this comma. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the study of free security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. Now, in the slave states, it was the slave patrols, and their weapons were kept at home, and that was their so-called militia. Well, in the federal states, the well-regulated militia had nothing to do with personal firearms by that comma. It is the biggest bamboozle, as the good justice stated. The second bamboozle is states' rights. We keep hearing about states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. 14th. So we have Roe versus Wade goes to states' rights. We will forget about it. We're going to go to 14th Amendment. So we have under the so you have the 13th Amendment, which frees all persons shall be free. There's no in chattel servitude, no slavery. So free and the slaves is the 13th Amendment. 14th Amendment endows all persons who are enslaved with by rights with right to life, liberty, and to happiness. Section 1. No state which takes everything from the Enlightenment. The first 10 amendments which come out of the Enlightenment is each person's individual. As we know with narcissism, people are not individuals. Le status c'est moi, is the state is me, as opposed to I am the state, so everything is me. The child thing of object permanency or lack of. Whether so the willing to do the lying, the cheating, the stealing. If you're a Christian mystic, it would be such a Christian mystic such as myself. You would say is the demon spirits, so to speak. So you know these are those things. I got lost. These are those things. Anyways, where they're speaking about in the First Amendment, you have the right to first be, because of to due process, you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, in other words, its 14th Amendment says you have all persons within the jurisdiction of the United States have all are completely covered by the Constitution. Section 1. All right. Section 2, the apportionment. Oh, the removal of rebellious persons, nor senators, which is the most important part, is it says you cannot be part of an insurrection and hold office. So, but Section 1 is all persons are entitled by rights, divine rights, to the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is the Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, the ideas of the Enlightenment, that each person finds their light, their way to their divine. But to do that, you have to respect each other person. So so it's kind of like you have these theocrats who are pointing, Christian theocrats pointing at Islam. Well, they're both doing the same damn thing. All religions devolve to that type of control, either directly as in Islam, or indirectly as in Christianity, or directly as in Judaism. Because Christianity is Jewish mysticism. Islam, before it went to Medina, is a form of Jewish and Arab mysticism. So, or Christianity is more Jewish and Roman mysticism, and then you have Jewish and Arab mysticism with Islam. And then you can say, in many ways, Jewish religion is the mysticism of ancient Egypt, which there'll be those who'll say, well, it's completely different. But Moses would have learned from, as the royal household, he would have had to learn from the royal priest, and everything was about the priest. And then, yes, granted, Israel heard, and Abraham, especially at that time, you had infanticide a great deal, and to still be that old and finally have one kid and say you still believed in a God the one true God to still, even though, and then a new lamb was brought to him as in a miracle. But he showed his faith, even though it was the thing he had wanted, but he had still believed in God. But then to then teach the whole of his children the necessary works to see God, to be directly connected to God. And you have the growth of what is God through the history of the God of Israel and all these systems. But it's still based on the mystic schools flowing throughout history. And the reason I say that is because I'm sitting there thinking about this because as I go back to Putin, and I'll come back here to the 14th Amendment, because Putin views himself as the czar, the new czar. He said Peter the Great, which are czars, and the conqueror of the Russia, the Rus, which are the Scandinavians. But he needs Kiev because that's the where the Eastern Orthodox Church moved to, the Kiev and then Moscow, and when Constantinople fell. So by mainly being Kiev, which is either called the Kievan Rus, he has to cement his name as Peter the Great. He has to take Kiev. He has to take Ukraine. He's never going to stop unless he's forced to stop. And as he's being drained right now, he keeps putting he's going to keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing his people until they get tired, or he can draw us into it, and then he can say, "See, I told you so." It's basically a little candy ass who gets. It's just a bully tactic, BS crap. But that's this thing. That's and to get there is where reason this 14th Amendment and is actually connected to Roe versus Wade, the 14th Amendment and the Second Amendment, as read as a Confederate, which is just this is so crazy. Which is all tied to why Trump knew he had to stay in office. You know, because he wasn't just doing normal crimes as a president. Everyone president was like, yeah, you did some shady shit, but I'm about to do some shady shit, or I did some shady shit. So that's why, presidents don't, Department of Justice doesn't, you know, uh, prosecute presidents. Because it's like, yeah, even though, if it comes up to a certain threshold, there has to be a threshold that and what Bill Barr did was just ridiculous. Yeah, he led a criminal president because he was so BS in his, you know, he was Catholic, and that's the whole judges thing. But the evangelicals are hiding behind the Catholics, and they're all just their whole, they're big, they're if you use Christianity to be bigots, and the the whole thing of Roe versus Wade is this whole situation. So Roe versus Wade, when they realized Roe versus Wade, so the whole thing is after. Let's go to the beginning. So we had the first in 11 to 12, you know, or more about the electors. But so you have 13th Amendment, free the slaves after the Civil War. 14th Amendment, guarantee the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Kick out anyone who shows any insurrection. Give Congress the power to act upon it. And then it was the second one. Was second is apportion to the respective numbers. In other words, finally get rid of the 3/5 compromise. And then the 15th Amendment is the right to vote for all males, African American males, black African American males. So, which was pretty much finally equality at that point within space and time. And you saw it happen. Black African American men were in the state houses. They were doing well. They were getting elected. And then during the Reconstruction era, Reconstruction with a little wink, wink, nod, nod. Then all of the Jim Crow laws by the 14th Amendment should have been struck down. All 14th and 15th Amendment should have been struck down. They were able to get away with the convict leasing through the 13th Amendment. And then they actually used the 13th Amendment to strip people of the 14th and 15th Amendment. And then if they couldn't strip you through the 13th by using the 13th Amendment by creating forced in servitude, then they would strip through segregation and poll taxes, and everything else is stripped the 14th and 15th Amendment rights from black African Americans. And ironically, also from European Americans in many ways. But that was like another tier, because as long as European Americans were looking down, it's like the other day, finally got one person I had known for years and years and years. Not really knew her very well, mostly out of real estate stuff. And I just person always thought they were way too clever, but they're doing their language sets. And, first off, it's like, oh, okay, you know, it's about logic. Oh, no, you can't be that. Well, okay, I'm psychic, I'm a mystic. You can't be that. First off, that's my religion thing. You can't tell me what I can and can't believe. But it's the whole thing, and we're constantly everything. And then if I put one thing on it, was talking about dude who in the Civil War who captured a ship, and he did. It was definitely a heroic thing, and there should be a movie about it. However, it was only then. It's like, okay, you can get that one. I'm like, no, bro, it ain't having it. My bloodline, I can think about everything from grand wars. I'm not going to. It's not my best interest, but to play that BS game that they like to play, to create this superiority when in reality mostly are just peasants. It's they, you can't. It was just her trying to constantly get this whole this one-upmanship, and then trying to language shit. And you can also see how they lie. They're saying, well, I'm saying one thing, but I'm really meaning another. And I was calling her out on this, and then she couldn't. And I finally got tired of her fucking toxicity. Now she unfriended me, but it was finally just like sweet. In many ways, it's just so toxic. And as I'm reading about these people who are in cults, and it is Trump's a cult, and he does use a lot of NLP, and I've stated that before for years. His people are in a cult, and the cult is based upon bigotry. But he is only the tip of a larger mountain, which came about in the 1619 era. That's why they're freaking out about CRT. After, was it which rebellion was, you know rich farmers were like, dude, we can't have these two guys realizing we can't. They realized they were getting screwed. They had a rebellion in Jamestown. They're like, oh, we can't be having this, so we're going to split this up, and then we're going to say create this whole idea of race, which never really happened. You either Roman or not or whatever, to because they would be hard to stalk out in the Dutch out in the sun or whatever. But it's also, you have control, and then if you view it as chattel, that's even better. You don't have to think of them as human. You just think of them as sheep. What do dudes do with their sheep? So this sheep, you could mate it and make more sheep. Oh my goodness! You purely look at it from a greedy perspective. He's like, wow, that's actually a pretty good deal. And I get to tell these dumb fucks, you know, oh, well, you're better than those guys. You keep track of my freaking farm animals for me, and I'll give you some scraps. That's essentially what it was. And these idiots fell for it. You know, so, and they're still falling for it. So, and then at the same time, being African, I still have the other, the genetic memories of the oppression of me. so, so it's like, oh, that's kind of fudged up when I think about it. But if you were to think like in those terms, what they love to do, they love pulling this bullshit out. Anyways, so you have your 14th Amendment. They're all pissed off. They're having a hissy fit. Southerners, so they've been thinking of this. They get their ass stomped in Civil War. Uh, the idea gets its ass stomped in the Civil War. And then they're still trying to do the whole uh, westward expansion and stuff. And so then we get to was it Jim Crow era, removal of the 14th Amendment, using the 13th Amendment, and then just other heinous laws that are actually unconstitutional according to the 14th and 15th Amendment. And then we get into, desegregation, segregation, and then we get into the civil rights era, right? And then you get Brown versus Board of Education, which is amendment once again. I don't know if it was on the 14th Amendment, probably not. He came with some other argument, but Roe versus Wade, which is actually irony, is mostly because it's a double whammy. It keeps poor black African Americans poor because they have all these kids. And then two, with the institutional systems of racism, everyone's supposed to be on the same team. All Caucasians seem to know that. European Americans seem to know that shit. They don't seem to know. They all act that way, and then they get pissed off if two African Americans are getting together or talking. They'll come in and I'll try to be like, "You guys over there talking? Hold on, what are you like? Shut the fuck up, man." It's like, so they know this is bullshit. So they play that. So the bigots play that game, and so you have 14th Amendment. We get the civil rights. Then they're flipping out Brown versus Board of Education. Catholics, because of the Immaculate Reception in conception or against abortion, and actually the contraception pill. The reason it's monthly, actually it doesn't have to be monthly, which is crazy, isn't it? We can actually just take that shit straight away, all the way through. It doesn't have to be this whole monthly cycle. The cycle was done because of the Catholic Church, and the guy who created it was actually truly, it was a deeply religiously and it wasn't really made for birth control. And that's why they all freak out about the birth control and the contraception. And then, and then the Immaculate Conception. God comes from above. Um, and it was the coolest thing in Huberman Lab. He was talking about how he wasn't really talking about. It was a post, and he talked about where the brain, the nervous system starts, where the sperm and the egg are conjoined. And so if you think about that, where would the pineal gland be that conjoinment spot? So let's take, I haven't done the research, but I'm just going to do a thought experiment. So let's say that if it was, well, then my next step was I went and said, okay, we know the pineal gland's for melatonin stuff, but the pineal gland and oxytocin and all the others that's not my thing yet, all those other types of chemicals that are going on there, they don't interact, they don't kick on until the kid has its first breath, which means it's the breath of life is when the brain, and it is a complete separate being. That's just me. But, so, and then which also fits in with the Bible, and then God breathed breath of air, breath of air, gave me a breath, smack, breathe, bro, woo! Right? And so, anyways, but the Catholics have a definitely good reason. I'm Catholic. I grew up Catholic, so I kind of, Catholic is spelling. But which is kind of funny when you think about it. Kind of like, hey man, fuck you. Anyways, maybe that's why I'm so twisted. But anyway, I digress. So you have these 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 two. Fuck, I got lost. Ooh, anywho. So yeah, the Immaculate Conception. So boom, Mary. So it was God who was the sperm head for Mary, and Joseph would have known back in the day, dude, back then, to be like, yeah, okay, yeah, dude, or he would have dipped. So he's like, well, or the dude had, whatever. So it was like, okay, he might could have said, so, you know, so Catholics have that. Then you look at the historical record. The evangelicals really didn't give a rat's ass. Their main thing was, they didn't want secularism. I said the Great Awakening. Great. There's two great revival is what I was thinking of. The Great Awakening, that's the puritanical thing. Great revival is, I think, was the counteraction to the more mystical aspects of secularism that occurred, which gives us a high, deeper evangelicalism, which is kind of the extroverted part of the more monastic monk style of the Catholic Church and shit. But anywho, just that's just brain popping off. Not really have done any research on that one, but just the thought process. But back into where we were about those two things. The main things were about Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade came in on the 14th Amendment. Southern bigots all of a sudden they were like, woo! They were pissed off before, but and then they really got pissed off because then they were going to do their segregation academies, Betsy DeVos and their whole segregation academies. But they want us to pay for it. They want the general public to pay for their little freaking Christian madrasas. Oh fuck no, dude, that needs to go. Cannex. You want to go to a private school? You go to a private school. That's your thing. You pay for it. You're not taking our money. Screw up our schools. Screw up the average regular person's schools. Make us less competitive globally, and then turn everybody else into third and fourth ranked citizens while they're all pissing off and pointing at the black African American. That's just stupid. After you've just taken, this is especially so, after the fact you almost overthrew the government. Now, evangelicals, there will be a price to pay. As I continue on. So, they get all pissed off about losing the tax exempt status, and they start preaching from the pulpit. How dare them say it's God or this? And what really is saying is we can't externalize, because a lot of them, what they're basically saying is we can't externalize our worst self over onto those people, which we've been doing since 1619. We can't be our worst self to those people. That's basically what they're pissed off about. So that way they can be mean to those people, because if you look at the South, they're all congeal and so nice, but you talk to how they treat black African Americans, the hate stare, the sneer, in the book Black Like Me, and that guy, and he's sitting there like, just his mind was exploding by how these neighbors, they knew him just a wee bit ago, but now they're treating him absolutely like pure blah. And he's like, what the heck? I'm like, yeah, that's externalization. But then you need turn the entire place into a bunch of flying monkeys. It's quite terrifying when you think about it. It's like, wow. So now these evangelicals, white Christian evangelicals, Caucasian, European American Christian, because I hate the European Americans, because one of the best gaslights they have is the hyphen. So, yeah, so that one chick got pissed because I said, oh, I'm Jamaican. Those people are some Jamaican. Well, I'm Jamaican. Yeah, I'm Jamaican American. But I'm not going to have it. I'm not, obviously, and just, but that's their whole thing. Well, only us could be in America, and it's kind of like, but then I said, yeah, I'm royal blood. It's, she's probably, her brain's probably frying out, probably like, well, you're lying. Oh, I wish I was. I think I'm, because I've had a last couple of weeks going, dude. Dude, yeah, keeping that association going is not an easy one. Let me tell you. It's not one of those like, yeah, dude, I get up this morning with, yeah, dude, yeah, that's exactly what's gonna make sense. Yeah. Anywho, made the mistake of actually saying some shit out loud to see what it would sound like, and then go, "Yeah, that was dumb." Sometimes it's best to keep your insanity inside your head. Um, so back to the 14th Amendment. So the bigots were like, "Oh, dude, man, we can't be working with those people, dude, because then we won't have any power, dude. We'd actually have to be fucking competent." Oh, God, scare me that, right? And so they realized, oh, you know what? That Roe v. Wade thing, shoot, we can do that. We can sit there, get rid of the 14th Amendment. Oh, and then what they have, you have the other dudes who are trying to get rid of not just the 14th Amendment, but they're trying to get rid of basically secularism. So, what was that? I was like, the 14th Amendment. There was something I was going to show you, but so it was this 14th Amendment. It'll probably come back to me in a bit, probably right after I turn this off. Probably before, hopefully before. Anywho, so it goes to the 14th Amendment. Then the 14th Amendment rolls back to the First Amendment, which actually rolls back to the original wording within the Constitution, reinforced the Bill of Rights. So the 14th Amendment ties all that together. So by taking out Roe versus Wade and stare decisis, they're actually taking out. Oh, I remember. There's how many states constitutional convention. So we have right now let's see here. So who, let's take this down. I don't want this Convention of States latest state. There's how many states? See the this is this thing, you know. But anyways, what this is there was one. So let's see here. This Oklahoma that's going to be really silly. So here's the thing: limit federal power. That's Article 14. This is Amendment 14. This is every. So they put this as limit federal spending. Everyone makes that sound a lot better than it really is. It's just a bunch of BS. You can definitely say, okay, um, set term limits for federal officials. All of these things can be done without the Constitution. They're doing this to destroy 14th Amendment. Because the only thing that can limit federal power is in the Constitution. And when you look at who's driving these this push its very powerful interest. So the whole goal, especially with Southerners, was to take out the 14th Amendment. And once you've taken out the 14th Amendment, the Constitution and then stare decisis, the Constitution means what was said, what was were, no settled. It's not settled law. If we decide to change our minds about it, which also kind of makes precedent, it's also destroying precedent, which is a legal basis of almost everything within the United States legal code and British and even in all the way back to the beginning of Western civilization. It's kind of funny. Roger Stone said he is a Western chauvinist, Western civilization chauvinist, trying to show that he is so hoity. I know how to use words to say white nationalist or white power person. When the reality is everything he's doing is actually counter to Western civilization. Now, the idea is, besides the split on the Church of Rome, the other part is was Rome more powerful as a republic or as an empire? It was the greatest at its height as an empire because of Octavian, better known as Augustus. But he destroyed the republic. And pretty much from then on through, it was just a slow, slow die. It was the republic that made Rome great. It was the republic that brought, yeah, still warlike and all that other shit, but they were a republic. It was, and it was even though the institutions of the republic had died, the unsaid ideas of the republic were there. But when it finally collapsed, is because even the implied, the statements, the cultural statements had finally collapsed to keep it going, because there was no longer, there wasn't no longer also the mental statement, the psychological statement of a republic, of debate in Rome anymore. It was just an empire, which is why it fell. So the secular, the non-secularist, the anti-federalist, or as they like to say in tongue-in-cheek, the Federalist Society, which are really anti-federalist. They are against a strong federal government. Essentially, we want a confederacy, but confederacies always break up after from trying to kill each other. But hey, well, some survive, I guess. Even though their constitution was very heavily influenced by the United States, the constitution, it's just they wanted their slaves, they just wanted their cheap labor to make themselves feel like God, I guess. Even though at the same time they said nobody could be the king or queen. Yeah, wasn't going to happen. That would devolve eventually into somebody being the king or queen, just by the whole setup, both the psychological setup going into it mainly, and then the psychological cultural setup of the South and its tumble hierarchy. So for all these times they've been sitting there trying to break the 14th Amendment. The reason, once again, 14th Amendment, from now on, when you hear 14th Amendment, you think when they start bellowing about states' rights. That's what they're really saying. The states' rights to limit the right to deprive life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And they're saying, well, we say we're taking your right to privacy, your First Amendment rights to privacy, to liberty, and then that's why they start screaming about religious liberty, when realistically it's if anything, they could say Islam could say, yeah, us not taxing other Christians or Jews, well, that'd be against their religious liberty, but sorry, um, yeah, the idea of religious liberty within the Enlightenment, which idea is each individual has the right to find their own way to commune with God, regardless of if that's Pastafarian or Islamist. But it also means you'd have no other right to infer or put your ideas onto others. I'll be real. I'm not a big thing about the whole trans and whatever thing. I think that's kind of just strange and weird. But God made them. You know. Now, do we now know have a structure to say, okay, that behavior is pathological? Certain behaviors are pathological and has nothing to do with what God made you. Yes. So a lot of their shittier, more effeminate behaviors, of triangulation and all that other shit, especially if they're men, that's bad behavior. And we have a model to state that's bad behavior because it interferes with another person's right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So, where was I? Okay. So, back to now, the reason all of that had to be said before, which I have no idea how long I'm yakking, is to get to the fact of these January 6th hearings. Right now, the Justice Department cannot, because the Justice Department is under the executive branch. Right now, the situation is that Congress has lost its power because it did not hold the executive branch to task for overthrowing, for attempting the coup, or the individual who was holding the office at that time. Right now, and right now, the thing is, they're also talking about, well, we got to send it to the justice. No, 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 no. Right now, Congress has no. This is the other thing about stare decisis. This affects this situation. There's another thing. There's another thing about I'm thinking about too. Professor Wolf. Gosh, there's too many things going on. It's about why. So let's go back to that before we go back into Professor Wolf. Okay. Right now, something before I get back into Professor Wolf started talking about, because I was talking about quantitative easing the other day, and he's talking about quantitative tightening right now because that's the capital to these two are for big business and for everyone else. So this is retail, this is wholesale. All right, this is the floor of spending, and then this is spending that can be used. Uh, you know, that was the schools, and that was the what's it called? I called it Braden's farting. Which is voting rights. Go blah 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 blah. But anyways, blah 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 blah. There's liberty. Blah. Anywho, brain's not. This is, you have your normal government spending, quantitative tightening, which is pulling money out of. This is for business, and this is for retail for everyone, and then, but there's also a corporate side to this lending. So if you look at what we are as what the Fed is, it's a borrower of it's the buyer of last resort. So they're, yeah, the Fed has been pumping all this cash, but they were supposed to pump the brakes off of that so that when they have cash to get us through this situation of inflation, there's nothing that, there's a lot to tighten, but there's no place for the Fed to still. So they still have to pay the money to the Fed, and then they still have to pay the money to the banks. But they're assuming all the money that they owe to the Fed that will just wipe their books clean if something happens to them. Oh hell no! Oh hell no! F you, pay me. And then the infrastructure, but this human infrastructure, whatever the family's plan or whatever it's called again now, is this is as the Fed is working the way through this inflation, because we're going to go flat. Math is math. We're way too far off our normal growth curve. As the inflation is working its way out, for instance, right now the child tax credit is not being paid out. As the Fed is selling off these rates, these cash flows into private hands from these government, you know, it's moving money out. It's tightening the the borrowing cost and everything. It's slowing down the labor markets. It's slowing down everything. So we need to go into retooling. There's going to be layoffs. Older workers are going to be needing to be going into retooling. Younger workers are being buried in debt. So you could say, okay, up to $100,000 every. It has to be law. 25,000 every year, so that way not too much money is flowing into the economy, and that way the Fed can balance it out. And then after 2 3 years, we retool. Bam, we launch off and we take off again, and we have capital. But as opposed to just pulling the rug from under everybody and kicking everybody in the teeth as the Fed does its magic and lets inflation work out. This way, we're prepared for the next wave of technology, and people have money in their pockets to fund that technology, and we have explosive growth. But right now, and that's where the thing is, Trump was going to say, stop all the tightening, kills the interest rates. Kills jacks the interest rates, hammers Black and African American families. These guys who bought at the top, or who sold at the top, who had insurance, wait for the market to tank. Then they buy. They've got all this money, so they buy from they sell up here, they buy down here, they get this cash. Then they come in and then they just hammer and they steal and start buying up all the assets from American families, and then everything's bought up, and then they launch it back up, and then who's left holding the bag? Only people who get anything are the super rich, and the American families are left once again hoping to maybe retire for 3 or 4 years. But now it's even to work until the last day of their breath. That's not right, and it really hits. But they keep it saying, well, you're only screwing over those brown people, or those black people, or those people over there, any other others. When in reality, they're hammering out African American, not just black African Americans, but also Caucasian and European Americans, and that's Thomas Piketty's capital in the 21st century. It's plain to see. So, with that situation, what's going on there? That's why what happens now is, in the next election, you need the two other senators to make sure that we invest in people as our as the Fed's getting through all this inflationary stuff. Because everyone's talking about, oh, the president's not doing this. The president is constrained by Congress, thankfully. But right now, because stare decisis is mute, and we had a president who did a coup, and Congress did not hold him to account. So we have to redo with the courts to reaffirm stare decisis, and then two, Congress. It has been shown. It's being very well shown that the president, the former president, office holder of the presidency, attempted a coup, and he needs to show himself in front of Congress. All three, Mark Meadows, Vice President Pence, and President Trump, need to be subpoenaed, deposed under oath, and none of this, because he's a citizen. They're all citizens now. And because this is a constitutional thing, this isn't a criminal thing, this is a constitutional thing. The President of the United States and or his agents step forth onto the floor of the Senate and of the House under the direction of the former office holder of the President of the United States. That is better known as a forced political coup. On one of the third co-equal branches of governments, therefore stating that that branch of government is no longer co-equal because one, the president, the former office holder of the presidency of the United States, was not held to account, and two, is right now it is unknown if persons there is evidence showing that there are persons who were both in the Senate and in the House who were actively involved in this illegal coup. But more importantly, when the president's agents stepped forth onto the floor of Congress and the Senate, they did not uphold their oath to the Constitution to impeach and remove the president, the former office holder of the presidency of the United States. So therefore, they are under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. They should be removed of their office, and under the 14th Amendment, the only persons who can remove them through a two-thirds vote are the persons who voted to impeach the former office holder of the presidency of the United States. So in other words, there's 43 senators who lied straight up. It's written. There's the thing. They lied. They should be removed from both the Senate, and those others in the House should also be removed, especially if they were actively involved in the insurrection. The only way for this to happen is for Americans to actually stand up you need to march. You right now, not right now, but you need to demand that Mark Meadows, Mike Pence, Donald Trump are deposed under oath. And if there's none of this, I'm going to take it to the Justice Department. No, this is a constitutional thing. The House of Representatives have to make a full vote on not contempt of Congress. It is it's the highest one. Just lost it off the tip of my tongue. It's sitting right there. I gotta go. There's types of inherent contempt. Inherent contempt then allows the Capitol Police, with backup of the jurisdiction of the executive branch, to fly down, arrest, and forcibly bring Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, to testify under oath for the January 6th committee. And Congress, has to have the backbone to do this. If they do not, first bring in and use their powers of inherent contempt, then if it is found the president directed a coup against the United States, that he's not impeached, that he's then it is found, if it is found that he did so, that he is impeached for a coup. But before such, impeached and tried again, and if it's double jeopardy, I'm sure he's broken some other law. And then, but more importantly, before that, the members who, especially if it's a coup, the members of the House and Senate, or at least the ringleaders, on persons who took active participation, such as Mo Brooks and Ted Cruz and Mitch McConnell, by not voting to uphold the Constitution, be removed from office. To do so will require courage of it would require ridiculous amounts of courage. This is what Vladimir Putin is betting on, that he can rip America apart, that we would shred our own Constitution, we'd put racism and bigotry over our Constitution. It's looking more and more like the former president of the United States was a traitor to his oath and the country. And he needs political cover to maintain his freedom. And so he needed Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz, Mo Brooks, Marjorie Taylor Greene to provide a lot of loud noise and cover, as well as him believing that the Federalist, more precise, the anti-Federalist type judges that he placed in would back him up on his coup. And in many ways, they're coming pretty close to doing so. This whole thing with the 14th Amendment, business interest, it's a combination of business interest and evangelical and Catholic. The evangelical, it's basically because it's, and that's where they're talking about the whole patriarchy, whatever. It's that externalization. Here's the thing with that whole patriarchy thing. You can see by the attacks, it's the whole patriarchy is just singularly as Caucasian, European American, which always changes as to what is considered European American or Caucasoid American. And it's just nothing more than a power trip. And then if you look at it, because it's then Caucasoid American and then everybody else. Caucasoid American male and then everybody else. And so this is where we're running into, and this is what Putin is saying, that your masculinity is under attack and all this, and then also the saying that he's also the top of, he is the progenitor of the old Roman Empire, just as Z is saying he is the progenitor of the old Chinese dynasties. If Congress does not regain its power, then it doesn't matter what happens in 2022. Trump did that little lawsuit saying, "Oh, Congress can't has to have a, um, which is the truth, has to have some legislative." It actually has two things: it has to have a legislative reasoning and also an oversight reasoning. And that oversight reasoning was the president of the United fucking States attempted a fucking coup and tried to end the republic and turn it into an empire. He was planning on doing this 4 years from now, because when he said, "Oh, how about I just stay forever," he actually meant that, but he just accelerated his plans. Here's the thing: hold him to an account, then get paid for upholding the Constitution and taking power back away from the oligarchs, swinging the pendulum back to center. Now, there's one thing is I was sitting there like you have was it Val Demings, her her marketing sucks, man. They just Stacey Abrams is probably working its tail off. You notice, you know, they did Herschel Walker and Tim Scott, the Republicans. That's basically who they really think Black African Americans are. So, you know, Stacey Abrams and Val Demings are threats. Stacey Abrams because she is a business owner. She understands business, understands the bottom line, and making sure that it works for everyone and not being bamboozled with the bullshit. You notice Brian Kemp made his main attack is when. See, one thing Black African Americans need to do is just start leaning into the call and response of their churches. That's how they do. Call and response is, it's who they are. Trying to You don't always have to get all super hyped up and get the Holy Ghost and all that crap, unless you're with African American communities. That's why Brian Kemp flipped out when Stacey Abrams was getting that joyous callback in the call and response type vibe when she was speaking to a bunch of African Americans, and he was doing that to say, "See, the niggers are coming for you." See, basically doing a little kitty shit, just scared a little bitch. So he is terrified of Miss Abrams. She represents a true, not so much to his mind a threat, but a true change in Georgia. And so the thing is, you can sit there and same thing as as Val Demings. She's law and order, and I keep thinking, should I? Because I should charge you a lot. Actually, to do this, because I don't think you're going to be. I don't think she's going to be able to pull it off. Because too many people will use my systems and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I got it. It's so simple." It's like that whole thing about the guy who charges an exorbitant amount because he knew where to hit on the frickin' side of the washing machine or whatever. That's kind of the way I am. So you're gonna say, "Well, it's gonna affect you." No, it ain't. I'll get on a ship and go fucking. I'll dip before I'm gonna put up with that shit. So, you know, yeah. Anyways, yeah, so you need to go back to your call and response. And, the main thing is, I'll give her one little thing. Quits. Val Demings should say she's a law in order candidate, not law and in, because then it's a little bit of explanation because she doesn't. I'm gonna put out a call and ask a friend of mine to see if I can get all three together. my prices are expensive, like $200,000, and no, that's not negotiable. Because one thing about Black Americans is because I charge $2 million for a half hour of my time, and two, it's also from my perspective, it is a paying for services already rendered that I did not get paid for, and I know it. And you and those in the Democratic Party know exactly what I'm talking about. Most people have no idea, and not just the Democratic Party either, oddly enough, but definitely the Democratic Party. But it's been weird when I look back at my life at what I've. Anyways, the because your branding's off, your messaging's off. It usually takes 6 months to get a message to test. You have, Val has 3.5 months. Abrams, same thing. You know, Val is more dangerous because you can say, okay, well, here's the thing. I can go with a little bit of like this because maybe she'll test it out and say, okay, yeah, well, this kind of worked. We need to figure out the rest of what the hell he's talking about. So all three of them need to work together. So the Senate brings. So Stacey Abrams can say, this is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to help farmers in Georgia. This is how it's going to buy what they say they need, and this is what we're seeing is coming down in the future. And this, now we can put it in and help them out. This is what we're doing for Fulton County as well. So and then you're using our senators, because if you have a senator who's really actually working for Georgians, not just against them, not just up there homemade chumming, then they have this other one just sitting around there just talking smack out outside of his mouth, out of his neck. They're going to notice. So you have Warnock working to get the money for Georgia, so it could do. And it's the same thing with Val Demings, but where Val, the whole thing about shouldn't be saying defund the police. You should refund the police. What do you mean refund the police? Okay, but you're a law and order candidate. What is law and order? Well, if a law is in order, does it do this? Yeah, yeah. If a law is out of order, does it do this? And they're like, yeah. And you're giving them, anyways. I go, but you get it. It's the call and response. Law in order candidate, and then you speak to it, is this law, if a law does this, is it in order? Oh yeah. If a law does this, is it out of order? Oh, it's out of order. So I want to do this. What would you rather me do? The law that's in order or the law that's out of order? What do you want me to fight for? It builds on the call and response idea of the African American community, while at the same time, you refunding the police by saying you should, is this good? Should the police also have a mental health that's not a well-funded mental health division? So because we know that 20% of the calls do not need force. Is that a law that's in order, or is that a law that's out of order? Oh, that's an in order law. Well, you sit there, you see what I'm saying. You use the rhetorical part left, to give the center, and also gives you a way of listening as well. Because, quite honestly, I think little Marco is he's after getting railroaded, run over by Trump, he's just there, just marking time. But, whatever, we'll see. But anyway, Congress, I'm about to write a letter, and the hardest thing is to try to write that letter, what I just said, but to put it into letter form to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Because if they do not, all of these forces, if they did not act, all of these forces, and then Chuck Schumer's, it's 100 of those guys, 100 of those people in the Senate, we just can't just rip through 43. Yeah, you can. At least, I know we know at least four. But you can't get it with 2/6. Well, if they're not going to freaking two-thirds, well, if they're not going to vote to get rid of those four, guess what? They're traitors too. Get rid of them as well. They say that might seem extreme, but no. It's exactly what the Constitution was talking about in its formation. I'll be contacted over the weekend, African American and union, but I don't think anyone's going to do anything. It's too complicated. Doesn't make any sense. Not enough energy. It's the shit that they're dying and fighting for in Ukraine. Freedom to choose your own destiny. If all the non-European American Caucasian, I guess Caucasoid men, if you're not that, I could see why European American men are like, oh, I gotta compete, and I could see that, whatever. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, quit being a little bitch. But because they all know that's the game. I don't have to be really good. Just kind of just do a wink, wink, nod, nod with this other dude, and they're like, yeah, dude, we're cool, bro. I got you, bro. You don't have to be fucking competent. Yeah, it makes the country weaker. And the main thing is, even if you're doing the wink, wink, nod, nod, it's the fact that you think that you don't have to do. So you need Trump is your avatar. Those laws are for those black folks, or those weird folks, or those over there. The laws don't apply to me. That's what you're thinking, right? They do apply to you, and they apply to Trump. He has you tearing down the thing you say you're trying to protect. Under, and the thing is, he sold us out to Moscow. So did Mitch McConnell, because that is what those are the strings that Putin's been pulling. Using the NRA, which is part of the Southern ideal, which was to get you all worked up, so to create that civil war. This has been a long time coming. We only have 3 months to stop it. President of the United States, the former President of the United States, attempted a coup and tried to turn himself into an emperor by another name. Only the people can set it right. And speaking about Ukraine, I was reading this thing. Right now, they need training in the European Union countries. They want this army, and there's two things they have: these like civilian part and this other part. And Ukraine's still running under the Russian thing of conscripts. Russia's running out of people, so right now UK wants to do 10,000 a month. If two other countries each can get 10,000, get 30,000 a month, that increases the op tempo. Also gives troops time to rest. Gets if you split it between normal frontline troops uh, and then your these uh, these battalions, which the these civilian battalions turned into battalions under the granted the Rada said that it had to be under the military, which means that it also is under Zelensky. But one of the things that you got to be careful at is the training necessary to be with a Western army is also so you have other Western countries training, so you get a 30,000 a month. That increases op tempo, increases freshness. So every 6 months, roll back in. It gets weapons into the hands of the battalions. Also, the civilian battalions should be regular army and civilian battalions. Civilian battalions mostly in the rear, partially go into the front. Because if they just send them to the front, then they lose the psychological reserve necessary to win. But anyhow, sometimes the civilians have to pull back the military because to a hammer everything is a nail. And this, whether I know Zelensky and the Ukraine wants to get this done quickly as possible. I'm still believing this is going to be a slog because of what how Putin views this whole thing. Oh, and the next thing is Ukraine had a lot of, or a decent amount, or several few students who live in Africa, in the African continent. These are the seeds to a more healthy trade relationship. It is suggested those persons in Africa, or those persons in Ukraine who went to school with these students, start to reach out to each other. Yes, it's a war, but not everyone's fighting on the front lines, and some you have the refugees in Western Europe. Start looking at what type of trade ideas, what kind of business ideas. Let's begin this trade dialogue and begin laying down this trade between Europe that is mutually beneficial because they know how to work. Those students know how to work in two different systems. One where there's a lot less, well, there's still corruption, but Ukraine's quickly getting rid of it because their army depends on it, and it's down to more intelligent type of corruption, so to speak, and more spread out. It's not just a bunch of dipshits stealing everything. And then those are the seeds that can grow because and show what non-colonialized trade should look like. So it's a little hard work, but it has to be done. So reach out and begin building these trade routes between Africa through Ukraine, because now you're having, even though it's small businesses, it takes a small business to become a big business. So anywho, that is today's very long, overdrawn thing. Slava Ukraine, glory to democracy, and may the flag forever wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave. Damn it, I forgot about that other one. Oh well.